Gonna get started. Welcomes might take a few minutes too. But welcome to SEL for CT's very first SEL week. Thank you for joining us for Be Unapologetically Impatient with Dr. Chris Cipriano. I'm Ashton Gauthier. I'm the director of Social Emotional Learning Initiatives for SEL for CT. And we are with the Connecticut Network for Children and Youth. It's one of our initiatives is SEL for CT. But before we get started with introductions, we just have a couple housekeeping. Also, while folks are still sort of coming in, we'd love to know who's in the room. So if you want to let us know if you identify as an educator in this moment, if you're identifying as a parent in this moment, or if you're identifying as both. Sometimes you could show up with your educator hat on and sort of block other things out. So let us know in the chat. I wanted to give just a really special thanks to our SEL for CT partners who made this week possible. So that's SEL for US, Greater Good Education Center, Narrative 4, 2-for-1 Sports, Embodied Holistic Healing, Poppy's Planet, Catapult Strategies, Liberated SEL, and the Education Collaboratory at Yale. Why don't we, I would love actually to introduce, we have, before we get officially started, I want to shout out Dan Holland. He is the CTNCY's admin who's been helping us out with tech all week, and has also been, he's one that you've been getting the emails from. He's definitely been a lifesaver in helping out with our first SEL week here. Dan, you want to come off mute and give us a couple of reminders?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks everybody for joining us for our first full SEL for CT week, and joining us for Dr. Cipriano. So before we get started today, um, if you'd like to come off camera, that'd be great. If you have questions that come up during the seminar, please feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat. Dr. Cipriano will go ahead and address them towards the end of everything. And one last reminder that this session is being recorded and will most likely be shared out across some social medias, just like certain clips here and there. But that's all I have. Thank you all for coming, and back to you, Ashton.
Okay. All right, I will officially introduce our speaker. So I'm incredibly honored to welcome Dr. Chris Cipriano here tonight to discuss her upcoming book that she is calling A Love Letter to Our Generation for Every Person Who Has Felt Small, Who Has Seen Wrong. It's for the care providers, the makers, the dreamers and doers, the educators and architects of the future that embraces our common humanity. Dr. Cipriano is an associate professor at the Yale Child Study Center and director of the Education Collaboratory at Yale. A nationally recognized expert in social and emotional learning, her work focuses on supporting marginalized students and educators through research, assessment, and intervention. She has had major federal and foundation grants. She's published over 100 articles in top journals and media outlets, and serves on multiple national advisory boards. Beyond her impressive credentials, she's also a dedicated mother to 4 who brings both expertise and heart to her work. So Dr. Cipriano, please tell us how to be unapologetically impatient.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. And I started getting to reply in the chat, but now I've gotten distracted and can't talk and type at the same time. But I'm honored that you all are taking the time to be here with me today for this conversation, which I will share with you is the first time that I am speaking about the book in this way. So I've given a couple of interviews, but I've never actually held any sort of, let's just call it book talk yet. The book is coming out in June and it is my first book. And although I do write kind of a lot, I've never written a book. So this is all new. This is new. And I'm really grateful for this intimate opportunity to share a bit about my love letter with you. So honor to be here with you. I am going to share some slides. Let's go ahead and get those up and running here. But you know what? I might not keep them up for all that long because we're a small group and we can have a conversation about some of these topics together. So I'm going to share this screen, and then you're going to let me know when you can see it more. All right, can we see the screen? Is that up
Yes.
and running?
Yep, it
Okay.
is.
Great. And you know what is so fun about this? The first thing I'll share is that this is not going to be the final cover. I actually got proofs from my editor last week, and it looks so much better than the one that I made in Canva 8 months ago when this project started. So you're seeing this for the last time. But what you will see on this cover is the representation of all different types of people and their everyday experiences. And that is something that is at the core of my book. So in Be Unapologetically Impatient, I am working to teach educators, to teach parents and industry leaders how to harness your vantage point as an opportunity and an everyday asset in your interactions, and the ways in which each and every one of us can use evidence-based strategies, and I'm going to go through a few of them with you all today, that are grounded in social emotional science to actually call each other in to those engagements. And I hope that you will learn how to inspire solutions for everyday challenges that are facing your family, your schools, and your community. And so since we are such a intimate group here, I actually think that I'm going to read you the introduction to the book to get us started. So again, first time sharing, and you all can let me know what you think. The subtitle for the book is The Mindset Required to Change the Way We Do Things. And let me share with you via a reading of why I wrote it. And those of you who have heard me speak before know that I don't ever actually read notes, so this is also awkward. So we're gonna do this all together. Okay. And time, great. You don't want to be like us and have to work any job you can when you grow up. My parents told my 3 siblings and me. You can do anything you want in life as long as you stay in school. With an education, you can choose to do what makes you happy, they'd say. And since we can't help you with your homework, you need to ask your teachers. Your teachers are the experts, and school is there to help you. So when you don't understand something, ask. So I did. I asked my 3rd grade teacher why I had to fit all my answers to questions into the tiny little work boxes on the worksheets. I asked my 6th grade teacher why our school was closed for some holidays and not others. I asked my junior high school assistant principal why we needed to buy our own calculators for math class, given that they were required to access the math curriculum in the textbook. Fast forward to my sophomore year of high school, 1998, dating myself for you all. I was enrolled as a peer mediator, and I learned the science of conflict resolution to support my peers in sharing their emotions to navigate the challenges of adolescence. So for a whole year, I ate lunch with my friend Steve every other 6th period, where we would coach each other through the use of I statements. So when you say or do this, I feel. We'd support them, all of our peers, to ask questions with the intent of hearing the answer and growing through the normal challenges of adolescence together. That spring, however, normal as we all knew it in high school turned upside down. On April 20th, 1999, the Columbine school shooting occurred in Littleton, Colorado. As the first mass shooting in the nation, my school district in New York, our community on Long Island, and states across the nation scrambled to meet the moment of need with reactionary band-aids. They chose to harden our schools, swiftly passing laws to install metal detectors and banning trench coats, leather jackets, studded belts, among other clothing, while also vilifying certain types of alternative rock music that the gunman had apparently listened to. Perhaps some of you recall this era of time if I'm dating myself. I found these reactions confusing. As an avid punk rock fan, I took it personally that the school policies were arbitrarily demonizing fringe music choices and clothing for the reason this horrifying violence occurred. If I could have bought a leather jacket and a studded belt in a high school, I would have. Would that have meant that I was going to obtain a gun and kill my classmates? These attempts to ensure safety were misguided and wholly inadequate. And so I asked my peer mediation teacher why the policies were happening to us. My teacher encouraged me to write a letter to my local congressman to express my concerns. So I did. I wrote a letter, pen and paper style, whole authentic 15-year-old self on display, I asked the congressman why they were not banning underwear in high school, because I was pretty sure that the gunmen also wore those, and yet they seemed to only be banning the things they could see. Like, what was the point of that? Now, true story, that essay won me a trip to Washington, D.C. I met then President Bill Clinton and had the honor of signing the first Youth House Resolution Against Violence. I returned from DC invigorated and empowered to effect change in my community and proceeded to support my district and neighboring ones with peace-building activities and anti-bullying pledges through my remaining time in high school. Nowadays, I'm often asked how I got into the science of learning and social emotional development. And you see, the truth is, the field really found me. So fast forward to my first week of my undergraduate career, September 11th, 2001. I stood in the dining hall at Hofstra University with a sea of strangers and watched the plane hit the Second World Trade Center on CNN Live. Our campus quickly closed to students and became a hub for first responders traveling into New York City to take shifts in their massive recovery efforts. When we returned to campus in the wake of the terrorist attacks, I was struck by the ethnic and racial profiling that was happening across the US. I asked a professor how I could help. She suggested I look into volunteering with an organization called Facing History and Ourselves, which uses lessons of history to challenge teachers and students to stand up to bigotry and hate. I soon thereafter became a campus ambassador and held safe spaces for our community as we grew through our self and social awareness and perspective taking, navigating what we now refer to as the domestic war on terror. So in the fall of my senior year of college, I was positioned to graduate with a degree in political science and double minor in philosophy and education. I set my sights on state schools in New York and the Greater metro area to pursue a master's degree in ed policy to set the stage for a leap to law school. When I told one of my favorite professors where I was applying, he dared me to apply to Harvard. I remember responding that Harvard is for rich, smart kids, and that is not me. And he encouraged me to apply, and he said he would actually pay my application fee as long as I wrote the application. So I did. That spring, I received acceptance to the Harvard Graduate School of Education for a degree in international ed policy and a certificate in child advocacy law. Now, at Harvard, they did this thing called shopping, where you could try out mini classes from all the many big name professors across the course catalog. And I went and I shopped for Dr. Howard Gardner's class to be offered that semester, which at the time was called Good Work. Although I hadn't read his new book, I hadn't taken any psychology classes before, I had heard of his popular multiple intelligence theory. So I wrote a 150-word essay how I didn't agree with him. And according to his theory on intelligence, it wasn't malleable, and it was understood to be this fixed trait of a person across their physical, social, and emotional and cognitive development. That essay earned me a seat in his class as the only non-psychology degree student there. At the end of the course, he did an exit interview with each student, something I do with my students now to this day, and he asked what I was planning to do next. I explained I was currently developing applications to go to law school, to go into child advocacy law, and he looked at me and he said, "Chris, you are a psychologist and you don't even know it." And he proceeded to draw my attention to how I keep a face on every statistic I encounter. And he said, you humanize data. How I was challenged by the economics of ed policy and the one size fits some benefits less models, how I was naturally drawn to thinking about context and systems that support individuals to thrive. He then offered to write me letters of recommendation for a handful of select programs he thought I would thrive in. So I did. A few months later, I found myself starting a PhD in applied developmental and educational psychology at Boston College and a certificate in human rights and international justice at BC Law School. I was going to become a psychologist. I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world by doing research that would evolve school policies and practices. For the next 5 years, I deeply studied how the science of learning and social emotional development could support all kids and communities to thrive. And while I learned all the sophisticated statistics and how to think like a profession scientist in my coursework, where my understanding expanded most was through my experiences in schools with youth and educators who had all been othered by the US education system. So I taught youth with emotional and behavioral challenges who were relegated to windowless basements in abandoned public school buildings that had been taken over by the state, youth learning in correctional facilities, youth who were wardens of the state residential programs, medically complex youth in and out of exclusionary public school placements, neurodivergent youth banished to hallways and trailers on the outskirts of their neighborhood public schools. I saw the best of humanity in the educators and support staff with colliding with a never-ending sea of barriers to their students' joy. All of these unfortunate experiences were laced with systemic prejudices. The systems designed to support the youth had been positioned by society to be most in need of services and social support were undeniably broken. I asked anyone who would listen to me why. From the school administrators, the district leaders, mental health professionals, parent advocates, teachers, specialists, families, and the students themselves. And the answer was always some version of, it's just the way things are. It's just the way we do things here. These lessons I learned about how the system isn't working for those who deemed by society to need it most, they came home for me when I became a mother. So seemingly overnight, I found my family on the receiving end of injustice masquerading as common practice, as compliance, as standard procedure, conventional wisdom, as a checkbox. And these injustices, they just kept getting uglier with each interaction I had, no matter the grain side. The culture, it didn't discriminate, be it at our kitchen table with the be it at our kitchen table, the local playground, on the sidelines during a recreational soccer game, or a national theme park. It didn't matter if we were at the doctor's office for a wellness check or riding in the back of an ambulance, again, en route to the emergency room. It was in their elementary school classrooms, around the IEP tables, at the school board meetings, at the university, and at the floor of the Senate. I heard it everywhere. It's just the way things are. It's just the way we do things here. And we're expected to be patient with it. So as it will turn out, I married that boy I had lunch with every other 6th period 2 decades later. And yes, he did use those I statements we learned from our peer mediation days when he proposed. We are building a beautifully full life together, having given the gift and the ultimate charge of supporting our 4 exceptional children to come of age in an increasingly tired world that is simultaneously wildly different yet eerily similar to the one that we grew up in. The leading cause of death among youth in the US right now are guns. 95% of students in the US experience active shooter drills, despite there being no credible evidence that they are effective at reducing the likelihood of violence. Culture wars and identity politics are tearing apart homes and neighborhoods based on stereotypes, misinformation, and bias. Our families are simultaneously more connected and more lonely. And while our kids are growing up alongside artificial intelligence, emotional intelligence is being banned from their classrooms. Issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are frequenting the national headlines, laced with racism, ableism, and hate speech. It is as if every new technology, science, medicine, information, and everyday convenience in their overflowing abundance are on this head-on collision with old ideas, bias, discrimination, ineffective solutions, and antiquated systems. I will tell you, I have been thinking about writing this book for a very long time, but what pushed me finally to sit down and do it was my middles, Salvatore and Eleanor, who started asking questions. Salvatore asked me why he had to hide for a drill at school. Eleanor asked me why I call her neurodivergence a superpower, while a teacher told her disability is an illness. When they asked me why they had to wait for another bus to accommodate their older brother Miles in his wheelchair when all the other families get to go ahead of us. My children's questions inspired me to a new level of realization. Why are we being so patient in the face of injustice? What are we waiting for? Now, to be sure, nearly everyone believes that patience is a virtue. And in fact, it is one of the few principles of correctness that communities across ideological divides agree on. But there is a distance between being polite and being right. It is time to be unapologetically impatient in our pursuit of justice. I see this in my own life when navigating systems of education, healthcare, and industry that are not designed with my families and our best interests in mind. And you can see this every day in the quiet experiences of all families who are navigating perceived disadvantages from disability, language, income, culture, education, and the discrimination they encounter on the regular. As Ashton mentioned, this book is my love letter to my children, family, and our generation. For every person who has felt small, seen wrong, it's for care providers and makers and dreamers and doers, the educators and architects of a future that embraces our common humanity. It may take our lifetimes to change how systems operate and even how you and I are seen in the system, but we can each harness the power of our positionality to interrupt the status quo right now. We can do it every day by prioritizing compassionate, empathetic inquiry. We can ask questions, just like my dad taught me, questions with the intention of calling others in, not out. And we can share expertise in the form of lived experience in real time to affect change. And that is what I will share, stories and illustrations to show each and every one of us how we can use evidence-based strategies to build a future for all children and families to thrive in right now. When our patients manifest as complacency with injustice, we are waiting for system change at the expense of our families. And I am not waiting for justice at the expense of my children, and you do not need to either. So it's time to be unapologetically impatient, and I appreciate the opportunity to show you how. So those who just joined the call or coming in, that is the introduction to my book, Be Unapologetically Impatient. I will tell you, I was having a lot of nerves and feeling reading that out loud for like the first time in this setting and space with you all. So that was a lot. I forgot to move the slides. I was too into my reading. So let me go back and see what slide you're actually looking at, which is just the intro one. And we'll go ahead and dig in a little further. And as I outlined in the introduction, really setting the frame for this mindset and mindset shift. Oh, I see so many members of my team have joined. Thanks for being here, guys. All right, so let's keep going. As I mentioned, these are the two slides from the intro that I forgot to share as I was talking, as we were mentioning, this idea of it's just the way things are and it's just the way we do things here was continually resonating. As I move into the book, I ground the experience of what it was like for us. So I have 4 children, 3 of whom have special education needs, 1 of whom has a rare disease. And at the onset of the book, I share our experience coming to a diagnosis for our son, Miles. And that experience took 6.5 years, multiple interactions with medical professionals, and a constant dismissal of his needs as being something worthy of attention. What we learned throughout that experience in building towards a diagnosis was that each and every time it appeared as though a door was opening, there was another barrier behind it. So instead of actually somebody moving to a place where they would then like actually service our son or help him receive support, address the ongoing and evolving needs, which I go through in significant detail as we go through the beginning of the book, it was just another like hurry up and wait. That just kind of wait and be patient. And while we were waiting, while we were on wait list for ABA, for social support, for services, to see specialists and ologists and additional levels of testing and insurance approvals, my son rapidly declined. And so he has a diagnosis known as Phelan-McDermid syndrome. It's a rare disease. There's about 3,100 people in the world with the diagnosis now. At the time he received the diagnosis, he was 6.5. There was about 1,800 people who had the diagnosis at this time. And what was known about the diagnosis is that it was regressive and rare. And so what that means is that as he ages, he loses skills. And so we had this very tense juxtaposition early on in the experience where we're seeking towards finding a way to help to support his needs as they are rapidly devolving while we're waiting, where we're told to wait across all of the different opportunities to have social supports from medical professionals to psychologists to all of the different ways in which folks could intervene. And, at a certain point, as I share in the book, the doctors are saying, well, he will never learn part of his diagnosis. But the truth is that, we have learned that it's not worth waiting when we're in pursuit of joy and justice. And rather, we have an opportunity to position ourselves in the way in which we're having these experiences that no one asks for, to have a child who's medically complex or sick or ill, right? To provide you with a vantage point. So if I take a step back in developmental psychology, J.J. Piaget teaches us that there's this idea of, he's a very famous cognitive psychologist. There's an idea of assimilation or accommodation. And so what Piaget suggests is that as you move across your life, everything you learn around you, you will either assimilate it or it will like affirm what you're currently knowing and seeing, or you will accommodate it, will change what you know because you heard something that was so new and interesting that you're like, okay, I'm going to like bank that in my brain now, and now this is what I know. And then at certain points in your continuum of learning and critical times, they call these in psychology, across the lifespan, you have accommodated so many different things that it's like a new pair of glasses. It's like a new frame for viewing the world. And all of a sudden, you can't unsee it anymore. You can't see it any differently. And when I think about the experiences that we have had in kind of the positioning of and learning about and getting to a diagnosis with our son, it was I can't unsee it now. It's here and I see it everywhere. That the response to joy and justice was, it's just the way things are. It's just the way this is. It's the way we do things here, and you have to wait. So I teach in the book, I kind of work through the ways in which we are assimilating and accommodating information, and how when you recognize that paradigm shift, that new way of seeing, you have an opportunity to engage with it. So let me give you an example. So I tell some stories throughout the book and early on in the book about how there are really a lot of well-intentioned people when they experience or they see somebody with a disability, that they'll say things like, "I'm sorry," or they say, even worse, "I'm sorry for him," or "I'm sorry for you." And I don't think that people engage in kind of sympathetic, apologetic interactions because they're trying to hurt or harm us. Rather, we might think about it as like they're trying to extend an olive branch and connect with us, but really the kind of apology is dismissing our needs and concerns and perhaps making them themselves feel better. Whereas being a more compassionate or empathetic interaction with us would be a more meaningful way to move it forward. And I saw some folks nodding when I said that perhaps you've had an experience yourself where what be it be disability, illness, or otherwise, where when folks either don't know what to say or think it's the right thing to say, they lead with the "I'm sorry." I remember like my work early on in school systems where I saw kids receiving diagnosis of autism, and it was being treated as the Scarlet A, and it was supposed to open up services on the one hand, but it was also an excuse for the school system to not need to service on the other, like simultaneously. And there was this kind of apology that was coming through that experience. And what I offer in the book is, what if we were to privilege these different vantage points that we're experiencing as an asset, as value add, rather than this like lost value that someone would be sorry for? What if we think about it as having the experience, and I write from the lens of disability as a way to broker into lots of other interactions and vantage points, that it opens up a viewpoint that you didn't have before. And that viewpoint itself is the asset, because now it is just the way you see things. It is the way that you are living, whether you are a parent of a child with a disability, a person themselves with a disability or an experience, or anyone who is engaging, or kind of has an identity that's in a space or place that has been deemed to be at a disadvantage. Many times we see this in the ways in which different neighborhoods and societies are structured around income, and that lower income communities are disadvantaged, right? Or the kind of the framings that you have, vulnerable populations or vulnerable youth, and the ways in which folks are positioned. But what if we take for a second and say, hey, instead of thinking about it as something to be sorry for, that this is an element of our existence and identity and an asset in the way in which we view things. And so I'll give you an example as I introduced to you when I was reading the introduction to the book, how, so I'm a first-gen high school graduate. My dad went to school through 8th grade. My mom got her GED. And so, as I was sharing at the very beginning of the talk today, they were, instilling in us, like, stay in school and don't be like us. And I'll tell you, there are like no people I know like me in positions at universities like I am. Like they're just not. I haven't met one. I look forward to meeting one. And so I have a vantage point that is differentially impactful relative to my colleagues who maybe have parents who went to high school, went to college, et cetera, like come from different lines of income. There is a hidden curriculum to higher education that I don't know either. Right. So that vantage point, so that disadvantage that I have is a different vantage point from which I can affect change. And how can I do that? I can ask questions and I can redirect misguided comments to teach people around me to value my vantage point. I can proceed with the idea that, the people who say things like, I'm sorry for him, they don't mean to dismiss his needs. Rather, they don't quite understand the value of his life. But I can show them that value through what I say and how I say it thereafter to support and affect change. I can choose to proceed with compassion and live my love forward through the ways in which I engage in communications and interact back with folks. And so it's a shift on taking these positionalities that often are, we're kind of socialized, especially across the US, socialized to position ourselves as less than, to be value add in the ways that we engage. And so, the crux of the book is moving through all of the different ways you could hear and see that's just the way we do things here. And so I see some folks nodding and thinking about, whether it's in maybe you've been in a school system and asked a question and someone has said that, or you've had that experience at the doctor's office, you've had that experience when trying to get a referral for an appointment, or any kind of interaction with a system or structure, and you ask why, and folks say, that's just, the way it is. I'll give you the more individual example of this, which I also touch on in the book, talk about at length, that's just how they are. And maybe you've heard this in instances of when people are saying things that are, a stereotype. They may be saying something that could be perceived as, or a microaggression. They may have something that is a slight, you hear these types of like framing around things. They are excused. I mean, right now, politically, perhaps we're hearing a lot of this kind of language being used around that's just how they are, of it excusing a person's behavior. Now, rather, we could take those moments and say, I feel a bit of discomfort when the response to an injustice is, it's just the way it is. It's just the way they are. It's the way we do things here. And rather, I can use social emotional learning strategies to interrupt that status quo. I can actually hear that as an opportunity to affect change and change it so that it's just the way we do things here goes from being, and this is my hope with the launch of this book, one of the most dangerous phrases of our generation to the one that is the most proactive one. Because rather, like, it is the way we do things. We are unapologetically impatient in the ways in which we engage with other people because we know that joy and justice is not worth waiting for. So when you hear the phrase, you lean into the discomfort. And in the book, I go into the whole science of discomfort, of like what it is, what it feels like, what it's signaling, how to engage thereafter. And think about it, well, why? Why is it that way? You can ask a question, take an inquiry stance, as I was sharing in the introduction, just like my dad taught me right from the beginning, like ask a question, why? Why is that the way it is? And does it have to be this way? You could consider to yourself, like, is this the way of doing things that is helpful to everyone? Was this system or procedure or protocol or process or technology or, right? Was it designed to be equitable or with my family, our needs, our responses in mind? Probably not, right? Was it designed to be inclusive of all people? Questionable. Was it structured to support some people to thrive? Maybe. And was it designed to beget equity or inhibit it, right? Questions worth asking. And the reality is, many of us have been socialized to not ask questions or to be apologetic in the asking of a question in the first place. And it's like, think about, I know there are many educators on the call, when you're working with students, and your students will say things like, I'm sorry, I have a question, right? And they're like apologizing, or you're like, you're a patient talking with a doctor, and I'm sorry, I have a question. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. I'm sorry, can you tell me more, right? And it's this apologetic questioning, whereas the person who's in that position of privilege, of that leadership role, that teacher, that doctor, that provider, they are the expert and should indeed have the answer to the question that's being asked, right? In the role dynamic that already exists there. And especially if you think about it in terms of education, that is part of the job, isn't it? Right? To respond and support your students to learn. And so we can ask the question to open up the dialogue so that we can begin to engage in how can this be different. And as I move through the course of the book, I tease apart how sometimes we've been socialized that it's like not our place, or it's not the right time, or it's not our role, or what, that it's kind of, there's all these different ways in which it's not polite to do so. And there is indeed a distance between being polite and being right in the context. And so we can ask questions that are based in fact, that address the content of it and not the person. So you are addressing, for example, an injustice, not the person in front of you is not the injustice. They are just the face of the injustice that's going on. The person on the other end of your phone call about why your procedure didn't get approved through your insurance did not make that decision, right? They are just the face of the injustice. They are not the injustice themselves. And how do you use social emotional learning science to call them in so that you can help to support them in making better decisions and choices from their relative positions of power? And so when we can be unapologetically impatient about the way we do things. And when you are given the gift of a different vantage point by what society has deemed as this disadvantage, we can actually leverage it as a perspective to evolve systems and structures for everyone. And so that's a summary of where the book goes and how, and I'm going to pause there so we could have some dialogue about it, because we are a super small, tiny bit mighty group, and like half my lab has joined the call during this time. So I'm going to stop, share it, open it up, and let's have a conversation. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I am like fully blown away. I was like getting emotional during your introduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like I basically need a minute to catch my breath. I mean, it was wonderful, and I cannot wait to read this book. Coming through the lens of like a parent who, is in it, So,
yeah, thank you for that, Ashton. I know, and I've had the privilege of getting to talk to a lot of parents along our journey, and what I hear from a lot of parents is, things about how like they're just so grateful that I'm using the position of privilege that have now to put visibility on the systems and experiences that so many of us across the country experience from the lens of disability in particular, and kind of anchoring in that as I kind of move through the ways in which to ask. And so let me give you like a really concrete example. I think I got a little like high in the clouds as I was trying to summarize. I don't really know how to, I'll be very honest with you. I told you all at the beginning of this, it's my first time really talking about the book, and I'm so deeply close to it that I haven't figured out what the like best small nuggets are. But we'll see once it goes into, it comes out into the world. So, when you're thinking about engaging with an educator or with a care provider or a decision maker on behalf of your child, we have to remember that person who's on the receiving end doesn't know who you are. They don't know who your experiences are. What they see is a parent or that parent, right? Or they see like a patient or that patient, that person who is in that role and it has the hierarchy in that relationship, that educator, that medical provider, that boss or leader, like they are at a place in their life or their career where they have decided from the moment they met you, likely, that you are either a parent or that parent. And so, and it's not like any real fault of theirs. This is natural lifespan psychology and science, right? We become more inward leaning as we age, and our brain starts to kind of trick us into not seeing people as they are. We just see them as we imagine them to be. right? It's why, you know, teachers, as they might have moved through their careers, are less likely to change their practices because they've fallen into patterns and they're like, no, I know that kid. I know that like they have decided already prior to seeing the representation. It requires attention and intention. And so in the book, I talk through, you know, well, what do you do? How do you break that? Like, how do you start? And how do I start? I start by making a like concrete introduction in the interaction that puts like a face and a fact on what we're talking about. And so if I'm like, you know, I do give some examples around like on behalf of my son Miles, my oldest with the rare disease that I was introducing at the beginning of the time. I'll say things like, you know, people will go to talk to me and I'm like, this is Miles, and I'm like down because he's sitting in his wheelchair. Like, this is Miles, my son Miles. He's a rare disease, and like he's 12 or whatever. You know, I give them something to put a name, so they're not just talking about the wheelchair that has no access to the building or whatever it might be. To humanize the experience. You know, when I'm someplace that's new, I'll say things like, you know, I'm Chris. I have 4 kids. I'm not from around here. Like, could I ask for your help? And it diffuses the situation, because what we also know is that when you're trying to affect change with the status quo, it could be really easy to get loud and put somebody on the defense. Like, how dare you not be servicing my child? How dare you like make us wait that long? Why is it this way? Or do you not know? And like all those kinds of things that could happen that could close down an interaction before you have an opportunity to make an introduction. In the book, I talk about this as akin to putting your headphones, your earbuds in and having the volume up too loud, and it yells, and it's like, it's so loud you can't hear anything. It's you know, completely inaudible, just like or similar to the way in which like in Schultz in Charlie Brown, when the teacher talks, for those of you who know that one, and it's like wah wah wah, and like you have no idea what's saying. Like, right, when you put somebody on a defense psychologically, and I'm going to go through how like what that's all about, there's no opportunity to form a relationship at all. And when you put them on the defense, there's a flight, freeze, or fight, and they're not listening to learn from you, they're listening to win the interaction. And so you can diffuse that by starting soft and introducing yourself and humanizing where you are and who you are. And then the next step in the process of being unapologetically impatient is to address the fact, right? Not the person, not the broader context, the fact. Like, there is no ramp. That is a fact story. Or her IEP says, right? It's a fact. Or we have been waiting for 2 hours to see the doctor. Fact, right? Like, not any of the other pieces. And I kind of go through these steps in order to affect change. But what questions or comments do folks have? And for many of my team, this is the first year like ever hearing me talk about this. This is fun too.
I know I see so many familiar faces. Everyone's speechless.
I mean, I'll just
Honestly.
jump in real quick
It's
and
late.
just
It's a long day.
say,
That was a lot. It's all good. Yes, Monica, go ahead.
I just I have 5 children, and they're all like getting old now. So we've been through some of these things that you've described. And yeah, I mean, I can hear it, just like Ashton said, like I can hear those things, and I can remember moments when I handled it really well, and I can remember moments when I did not handle it the way I wish I had. But yes, everything you're saying, it just makes perfect sense. And the things that went well when I, in some mysterious way, did what you are saying, and was able to calmly, you know, point out the issues, or just decide that, you know, my children are awesome exactly the way they are, and I'm going to move forward with my plan, with or without the system working in the direction I want it to work. Yeah, so, you know, what you're saying rings perfectly true.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Hi, Chris. I know that you wrote your book. Oh, this is ZJ.
Hi,
I know
ZJ.
you wrote your book before the changes in the administration?
I
And I'm
did.
wondering, given the current social political climate, like maybe what changes would you have made to your book, any additions or anything that you want to highlight even more given the crazy times?
I so appreciate that question, CJ. And although the current administration and the actions of the current administration are not in this book, because the book was written before the election, the lessons that I share through the book are, for better or worse, highly relevant right now. Even one could say even like emergently so, in why each and every one of us has an opportunity, and I would dare to say obligation, to be unapologetically impatient in the pursuit of justice for our families, for our school communities, for our livelihoods, in light of some of the, the range of kind of decisions, orders, or recommendations that may be happening in places or spaces that undermine, undercut, or remove the rights of people across a range of vantage points, and or one could say the disadvantaged way in which we were kind of are framed. And so I have been working hard to live my truth in being able to employ these skills in safe and productive ways right now in real time. And so I'll give you let me think of, so you hear that someone is sharing something that's mis or disinformation. Maybe it's a family member, right? And so there's perhaps an inclination or response where we might, want to get loud or get hot, or we feel the emotions rising. In the book, I kind of go through all of this of like what that all is happening with the sensory input. And but again, we can have an opportunity to call someone in and not out and blame by humanizing, by engaging in the fact, what we know. And I understand that's really challenging right now, but we can draw down to the smallest grain size fact to be able to help to move the conversation forward. I'll give you another example. I was at Children's Hospital with my son last week, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, and he was having a reaction. He was having an issue with his G-tube, and the medical provider and the doctor were saying how, so like the nurse and the doctor, and they were like, oh, it almost looks like he's having an allergic reaction. Like, I wonder if the company who makes these medical devices, if they changed, how they make them. There's been lots of people changing lots of things right now because of like imports and exports and like how they're kind of producing at scale. And she says, you should call them. You should ask them. And I laughed a little, which I probably shouldn't have, but that's where I was at in the day. And I said right back to her, or you could call them on behalf of all of your patients at Children's Hospital and request if the way in which this has been made has changed in light of the, access to imports and exports. And she had this argument around like things must have changed right now. And so that might be what's going on, because although my son is potentially the first child she's seeing having let's just call it allergic reaction to something new that has occurred in light of it, he is likely to not be the last. And people in the position of privilege and power in the hierarchy of the dynamic are more likely to be able to move the system than we are, right? So it's about the call in. So yeah, thank you for that, CJ.
Carolyn has put in the chat that she's taking lots of notes. and,
Oh, thank you. Let me scroll up
and she would
here.
like to get in contact with you as well.
No, it's
Totally.
it's a
Welcome
nice
in.
break from a dissertation for 1 hour, so I appreciate it. No, but it's been like
Congratulations.
taking a graduate course tonight. I'm so grateful that you've done this, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And
I put some of the
congratulations.
some of the quotes that I took, just amazing. Just as Ashton said, I think I'm still processing most of it, but on so many different levels. Some family member, my mom's currently paralyzed, wasn't always paralyzed, nonverbal, tube fed. So I've come into this sort of later in life, that part of it, but on a personal note that resonates with me, but I shared some professionally. I've also worked in intervention with children, IEPs, and so much of this is sort of colliding. So thank you. Feel
Thank
very
you for that,
fortunate.
Carolyn.
And a quick shout out to Dan for the emails, because I would never have remembered. I was immersed in my research study. So I'm glad that he reminded us. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on finishing your dissertation.
Thank
The
you.
best dissertation is a done dissertation. So, you know.
I'm defending like 3 weeks from this coming Monday, but who's counting? So I'm getting close. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So for some folks in the room who might be neurodiverse themselves, are you going to be doing an audio piece
Absolutely.
to your book?
I am. Yes, I am. And it's really interesting. I found this very interesting. So like I said, I've never written a book before, but apparently there's this whole science behind when you do an audiobook that's like part of the like production world of like selling books. That's based in the notion, right? This is just the way we do things, that like your goal is to make money off the book. And so I've been going around with my publisher on how, you know, like they're like, you're supposed to wait on the audiobook and wait like a year to release the audiobook. And they're like, you're going to cut your sales if you have the audiobook come out sooner. And I was like, well, but I'm writing a book about accessibility and inclusion and injustice. And how awfully ironic would it be if I then waited to make an audiobook? Like that feels, so I've negotiated that literally so the book comes out in print in June, and I immediately get to go to studio to record it. So it's not coming out exactly the same time, but it will be as soon as I could actually say the thing without making too many mistakes. Thereafter that, it'll be available to move it up. But it was such a fascinating learning curve to me. And I thought about just another one of those injustices baked into a system of that's how we do things, that was designed with the intention to try to help, right, a person or a author or a publisher in that setting. But in doing so was like systematically excluding or delaying access for a whole host of folks for a whole variety of reasons who would benefit from access to an audiobook.
And you're going to be doing that? You're going to
I
be
am.
doing
I'm going to read the book. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome.
That would be great. I was thinking it would, in my future courses that I teach, I'd like to add it as required reading.
Oh,
And I
thank you.
think it should be required reading for all teachers based on some of my professional experiences. I highly recommend it to colleagues as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Carolyn. Thank you. I'm hopeful that it will give people some tools and opportunities to affect change in real time.
I think the firsthand narratives is what gives it clearly the authenticity and the meaningful experiences. And I think for some folks to hear from a parent could be really meaningful and almost life-changing, really.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, the few podcast interviews that I've given to date on the book with folks who've read it across, it's been in education and psychology industries to date. They have said very similar things to the effect of like, I can't unsee it now. Like now that you said it and you drew my attention to it, I hear it, I see it, and I'm figuring out like where I can step and how I can engage. And so I think that if all of us can carry one little grain forward, like we've got an opportunity to really move it here.
Anybody else have any questions for Dr. Cipriano? They want to say?
Well, thank you for having me, SEL for Connecticut. Thank you, Monica and Dan and Ashton, for setting this up. Thank you, Carolyn and Beth, for joining here today. Thank you to my team for just somehow all, I don't know, texting each other and showing up on the Zoom just now. That was really, really something. So very much appreciate that. And yeah, I look forward to sharing the book with you, and I hope that you find it useful and helpful and see yourself in it in ways that are meaningful, and then share it with someone else you know, so we can all live our love forward.
And Zoe says, Chris, just listening to you speak so authentically about your, oh, it went away. Oh no.
Thank you. Thanks, Zoe. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we all can't wait to read it, clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. this is, I can't say it enough, has been so wonderful. We have a save the date here for Empowering Resilient Leaders Learning Lab, which I'm hoping to launch this summer. So we're going to be sending out an email with some of that info, as well as our survey. And their Greater Good Education Center has given us a couple free courses on the basics of mindfulness. So if anybody wants to fill out the survey here or at the end of the week, just in completion of SEL week, we would happy to have any feedback possible. But I just want to thank you again, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Cipriano.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
It's
you,
great to be
everyone,
here.
for being
Take care.
here.
Yeah, have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ashton, careful driving home. It's like pouring at my house right now.
Ugh,
Yeah.
gross.
It's yucky.
It's terrible out there.
I know. I thought something was flying around my head. I went off camera. It was just like the wind and
It
the
got so
rain.
dark in your room too. At one
Yeah.
point.
It's super dark here. And then my cats are both like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it through this because they're coming up either side of me and like because they want dinner. And I'm like, I forgot. I should have fed it beforehand. And then they're like, the one cat's trying to eat my hand. I'm like,
Oh my
trying to
God.
remain like straight ahead.
Composure. Yeah.
My dogs are like barking at the wind the entire time.
Oh, it's crazy.
Couldn't hear them.
No.
No, I had to go on mute for the entire thing.
Oh,
So.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Come along.
Yeah. I really can't wait to read the book. I am genuinely.
That was way different and better than I thought it was gonna be.
I know, Dan, you were skeptical.
I was skeptical.
I was like, no. Like, and maybe it's because I know her from like speaking. I was like, just like, wait.
No, she was really cool. She was really, really
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So is it just her one son that has special needs, or does she have multiple special needs children?
She has multiple. So her daughter also is autistic. And I think she has another kid with an IEP too. I'm not sure. So 3 out of her 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know I had never heard of. I was looking it up as soon as she said it. That Phelan McDirt.
Yeah.
Never heard of that before. It's so sad.
I know. Terrible.
But I mean, I guess she taught us it's not.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Don't be sorry.
Exactly.
This
It's
is
heartbreaking, but
Yeah.
heartbreaking.
still an awesome kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. He is not his
It's not a
disease.
diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have
No
a good
problem.
night.
For hanging in
Good.
until 6 o'clock.
I got that email out for Poppy for tomorrow, so that's good to go.
Awesome.
And then what time is Poppy? She's 11. I'll be in
She's
the
at
office
11.
probably around the same time.
You'll be in the office. Okay. I will not be in the office. I will be at home tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the next 2 days. But yeah, thank you guys.
Dan, my
Alright,
resume is almost done. I haven't done a resume in 24 years.
No,
now,
it's okay.
so
Honestly,
been a
just
joy
like
to try.
just
I
like
don't know what I've done in my life.
basic stuff. I think Michelle just wants something that we can like kind of like just plug in. It doesn't have to be like beautiful or
Okay. It's almost done. It's
Okay,
just sort of
cool.
like, I don't remember.
Well, your
my
resume,
life.
I mean, you got the YMCA.
Well,
I mean,
But it's
you
like,
know?
what did I do and what were the years and what education do I all those things. I'm trying to find an old resume because I'm like,
Oh my God, somebody just
I'm really
entered the waiting room. I bet they think that I bet they're an hour difference.
yeah.
well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who can't keep track of time.
Oh.
God, I couldn't believe it when you sent me that thing. I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Oh.
So stupid. Oh well.
No.
Not a big deal.
See this one.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
you guys.
have you here.
Good night.
I'm gonna talk to Rasha and let him know the recording. I'm gonna admit him and let him know. Maybe it was a time difference. And yeah. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye. Hi, Rasha.
Hello.
So we actually just ended with Dr. Cipriano. But I'm wondering if it's a time difference.
Oh no.
So it's 6 o'clock here where I am, or where we are.
It's
But
5 here, Central.
oh, yeah, we are Eastern. Sorry.
Oh,
But it
okay.
is recorded.
Okay.
And we will be sending it out and putting it up on our website. So we're gonna review all the recordings on Monday, and we'll have it up and get it sent out to
And
you
it didn't
so that
have,
way you can use it.
I double checked because it didn't have Eastern or Central, like it didn't have a specification next to the timing.
We didn't realize that this really went out nationally. And so I think that that is a lesson learned though for us,
Okay.
that we will absolutely be putting ET on everything
Okay.
moving forward,
Okay.
for things that are definitely more broadly shared. So I'm so sorry about that.
Okay, no worries, no worries, no worries. I
All
wanted
right,
to
but
support Chris.
we will send you the recording for sure.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Have a good
Yeah,
night.
bye-bye.
Bye.